So our concept for this is pros versus Joes, right?
What is this, amateur hour?
Hey, buddy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good. You hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
37 minutes. Engage. Engaged.
We met at a networking event that I got kicked out of. So
Wow. What's the story there?
On Location podcast. Pro vs. Joe.
Oh, that's it. I've had it with this dump.
okay, so what is the difference between a claims advocate and a public adjuster? Is that synonymous or?
I would kind of put it to you like this. Hey, Brian.
I think we can't do this. It's over. That's a cool story too.
We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off.
So for me, the public adjuster part is what gives me the license. It gives me the ability to represent a policyholder to their insurance company in a first party claim.
What are we calling this? Pros versus, or not pro versus
I don't know who you are.
Joe, pro and Joe, pros versus Joe.
I don't know what you want.
To me, the difference is, I'll call it more branding and advertising, if anything. So, because the public adjusting part's the license, but that's not necessarily the work that I do. I would say 99% of public adjusters focus on covered losses, and then just ultimately finding a damage number, right? Like resolving damage disputes. So what I'm looking for is actually the doubtful and disputed claims. So claims where reservation of rights letters have been issued, claims where denial letters have been issued, and ultimately looking to correct those mistakes.
Pros vs. Joe. Pros vs. Joe.
Regardless of get mine. Another long day, never say it, don't try. Ain't about paying my face, don't lie.
Shut up, you're so annoying.
As if 2020 didn't already have enough going on. Maybe some of you noticed, like last week we didn't post a podcast. Well, I procrastinated a little bit. I had intended to finish editing on Labor Day, and we had some fires in our area. Tacoma is not historically known for having a lot of fires, but just up from the hill from us in Bonnie Lake, fires got pretty close, and we had fires along our freeways and those kinds of things. And so got hectic. We lost power. Our power in where we live was unrelated to the fires, but still, one of those inconveniences. So you've got, the East Coast has storms now, and the West Coast has fires, once again. And so, man, our heart goes out to, all the people dealing with that have been displaced and lost homes, and kudos to first responders out there that are still battling fires. It's been really cool to see some of the community events where, like one of the local high schools had, stop by and get free lunch, and Rick Dancer, who's been on, posted about similar activities going on in Springfield, Oregon. And so, we have an awesome capacity for helping each other out, even when it's been chaotic. The great thing is it seems like people rise to the occasion right when it's needed. And so, that's awesome and encouraging. And, if you're able to get involved, help others out, and those kinds of things. You probably heard we have a September event going on. For September, the whole month of September, we're raising socks.
But I'm so freaking
Excited. Yes.
And man, that's been super encouraging. Just we've got a couple of teams here in Washington, a Canadian team and a team in Reading, Pennsylvania. So in Canada, it's Insurance Restoration Pro, Darren Miller. And in Reading, Pennsylvania, Lisa Lavender and Peter Jordan with Berks and the Restoration Technical Institute. I've been part of it. And Lindsay Ward here with Content Specialist in Seattle has been really active. Tammy Berklid with with Merritt Construction out of Tacoma. Her team is always very, very active in the community and those kinds of things. And so it's been a lot of fun to see people come around that. Support us, donate, share the hashtag Soctember. Thank you so much for everyone that's already come aboard. Shout out for our team, the Sock Kings, Marina Tanay with the Wamoa. It's been very, very generous, and members of that group have donated. And so just socks. So it's been a lot of fun. I just really challenge everybody to see the good that people are doing and promote that. We need to hear more about that and promote that, and it's been nice. And so we recorded this prior to a lot of these things happening. Like I said, this was supposed to come out last week. And so this is the DYOJO podcast, the infotainment leader for property restoration, construction, and insurance communities to help you shorten your dang learning curve for professional development, right? So this is Pro versus Joe, the podcast within the podcast, which is normally Brian Close, the Joe from All American Restoration Services. We've been saying forever they've been pivoting. They've done pivoted. They are active in insurance claims restoration. Brian and Brandon are doing a great job and having a lot of fun learning that whole process. And and then myself, the pro, what's this? You say the author, the acclaimed author of Be Intentional Estimating by John Isaacson, the Intentional Restorer, developing the right mindset and habits for yourself and your team to succeed with estimating property insurance claims, available in Kindle and paperback through Amazon. But it's been exciting. One conversation I had earlier last week was with Christopher Stanley of IA Path. And so he does a really cool thing, has a much more organized, as far as helping independent adjusters, like all these different avenues to careers where they want internships or entry level, but you got to have 2 years of experience. And it's like, what? And so he's found a really unique way to help independent adjusters do their training and get into the field quicker so that they can pursue, that career avenue. And so, it was just really encouraging to talk to him here. I mean, he's written, I think, 9 or more books, adjuster playbooks and those kinds of things, and some fiction as well. And just kind of a kindred spirit. He's trying to help adjusters get, processes and things in place so that they can pursue their goals. And same thing we're trying to do, especially with this book. It's a lot of it's specific to restoration, estimating property insurance claims, and Xactimate and principles around that. But the principles, and we've been getting a lot of really positive feedback from contractors, just even general contractors and even general business practitioners about some of the processes behind it and how those are helpful. So that's been encouraging. It is 5-star rated. I think we have 4 5-star reviews. So yeah. So that's been a lot of fun to see people, supporting Soctember, supporting, various things throughout the community, supporting the book. And I'm really excited. Xcelerate Restoration Software. Rachel Stewart was a guest on the podcast recently, and
A lot of times when we're in something that's really difficult and it feels really heavy and really bad, but the change that it forces in, you to take, and some of the steps that you end up having to go down, and the road that you end up can actually be, one of the biggest blessings in your life when you look back on it. So I do think that a crisis can lead to opportunity.
Let me hit you with some knowledge.
A crisis can lead to opportunity.
And kind of we were talking more about kind of the rollout, the continued rollout from her book Unqualified Success. But we touched on at that point Xcelerate Restoration Software, and it was before she made the jump to pursue that full time. But a program made by restoration contractors for restoration contractors with Rachel Stewart behind it is very intriguing. And they have put together, once this conversation starts about 12 minutes in, we'll have a sponsored feature with Xcelerate Restoration Software, and they're talking about an iPad that they're giving away. So Xcelerate, hands down, offers the best field service solution in the restoration market. They're putting their money where their mouth is and giving it away a free iPad. So you want to pay attention for that link. You can request a free demo and experiment with it and see what other contractors are finding with that as a valuable resource. So on this episode of Pro versus Joe, the podcast within the DYOJO podcast, we have a first time ever a guest host. So the first ever guest of the DYOJO podcast was David Princeton of, David Princeton of Advocate Claim Service. So, and right at the opening, he talks about what's the difference between an independent adjuster and a claims advocate. And something really interesting that Brian and I discovered through the podcast, and then Brian actually referring a client to David, that's an avenue available to restoration contractors if it's doubtful and disputed, it's not quite going through the process the way it should be going, and you feel like that client needs more representation, then claims advocates such as David Princeton are available to help them through that process. They do a claim review, check it out, see what they can do to help them discuss more intelligently that coverage with their carrier. So,
what'd you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills.
So again, spirit of collaboration, Pro versus Joe, the podcast within the podcast. We're excited to have our first ever guest from the DYOJO podcast back, David Princeton, and then the first ever co-host / guest of the Pro versus Joe podcast, Brian. So this is a conversation between three friends talking about some hypotheticals, talking about some of the recent COVID cases and some of the where the clients, the insured, have been getting some traction with getting representation, from their carriers. And so hope you enjoy this conversation. Shout out to all you people on the front lines helping each other out, whether that's neighbor helping neighbor or contractors helping clients or first responders, those kinds of things. So continue to do good things and take care of each other, and enjoy this episode of Pro versus Joe, the podcast within the podcast from the DYOJO podcast.
Say, we didn't do this last time. None of us are qualified legal experts. We're just discussing this.
You need to have a little disclaimer go across the bottom there.
Nobody can take this as the Bible or whatever else. This is just a discussion between three friends talking about hypotheticals, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what is the difference between a claims advocate and a public adjuster? Is that synonymous, or?
I would kind of put it to you like this. Hey, Brian. To me, the difference is, I'll call it more branding and advertising, if anything. So, because the public adjusting part's the license, but that's not necessarily the work that I do. I would say 99% of public adjusters focus on covered losses, and then just ultimately finding a damage number, right? Like resolving damage disputes. So what I'm looking for is actually the doubtful and disputed claims. So claims where reservation of rights letters have been issued, claims where denial letters have been issued, and ultimately looking to correct those mistakes. So that's
you said denial letters, and what was
yep, reservation of rights letters, RORs.
I've heard of denial letters. I've not reservation of rights. What would that apply in?
So an insurance carrier has to do two things, and you let me know if you want the super insurance nerd answer or a layman's answer. But
Let's go deep.
Let's go deep. So super nerd answer, right? So the super nerd answer is this: is a reservation of rights letter. Or I'll back up one more step. So insurance regulations, they require insurance companies to disclose to policyholders when they become aware of facts where coverage may not apply, right?
Okay. The insurer has to tell the insured there's a question, doubtful and disputed or whatever.
Yep. So
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
there's a question about whether coverage applies to this loss or not. So the way that this happens is that, and it depends on your jurisdiction a little bit, right? But typically within 10 to 30 days, they have to issue a notice called a reservation of rights letter. Otherwise, the insurance company can commit one of two things, either a waiver or an estoppel, right? So
Estoppel?
Estoppel, yeah. I'm hoping you're not recording this right now. So,
We are.
Yeah. Oh, we are recording this. All right, perfect. Oh, we are recording this. All right, perfect. A waiver is when an insurance company or an insured, for that matter, does something that how to put it? They're essentially saying this part of the contract, we're not going to hold you to it. So they've waived their rights to that portion of the contract. So a reservation of rights letter is the insurance carrier not waiving rights, basically saying, hey, there's provisions of this policy based on these facts as we understand them today, where you're not going to have coverage, right? And so that reservation of rights letter, it typically goes out in the beginning part of the investigation into coverage, because it literally says down on the bottom that, nothing that is omitted should be a waiver or estoppel of any rights that either us as the insurance company or you as the policyholder have underneath this policy, right? So reservation of rights letter is, I'll call it a disclosure. It's a necessary disclosure, right? It's also where
in construction, the lien notice, right? Like
lien
notice.
Yeah, very good analogy. So yeah, very much like a lien notice. And then the denial letter is to me not the conclusion of the claim. It's usually the beginning of a claim, right? Sure. In terms of the stuff that I look for in terms of doubtful and disputed losses. So the denial letter is when the carrier says, based on these facts, this is how the coverage applies to those facts. It's not a covered claim. And so that's where you see right now the insurance company in terms of COVID, across liability claims, across first party losses, is taking positions that it's not covered.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's, if you get a reservation of rights letter in terms of a COVID claim, I would say that insurance company is doing more than others are in terms of trying to entertain your loss.
Yeah.
Reason being is at least a lot of the feedback I've gotten from my clients is that the first conversation with the adjuster usually goes, I'm going to deny your claim. Now tell me what happened. And because the loss report comes in and it says COVID business interruption.
Yeah.
And so the adjuster is essentially leading with, I'm going to deny your claim. Now tell me what happened. And that's what you're seeing in terms of a lot of the bad faith allegations that are coming out in in litigation, all across the country in terms of different carriers leading with a denial. So instead of actually evaluating the claims and going through the process of adjusting the loss.
Well, I don't know if it applies the same, but I know you talked about independent adjusters. I've got friends that do that. And when they go out on, catastrophes, the insurance company has an obligation state by state for like a pretty short window of time to like get some kind of settlement to those insureds. And so usually, just like you said, with usually they're low, right? It's not necessarily thorough, but they have, it's some of this like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It's really hard.
Right? They're like, we want insurance companies taking responsibility and doing something quickly, but it creates a whole lot more confusion, right? So you're supposed to send this reservation letter out, but that could also create a lot of confusion or in the situation you're talking about where the adjusters are denying it. Now let's talk about it. It's, I don't know, man. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe just to bring color to what you were saying there. So when you have a catastrophe event that comes through an area, insurance carriers are usually there addressing what is widely known as a covered claim. right? So tornado takes out your town, like the horrible situation in Iowa. 99.9% of the time you're going to have coverage for those things, right? You may not be happy. With limits and other things, and you may not be happy with whatever sublimit applies to a wind event, or maybe it's a percentage-based deductible, but you're going to still essentially receive some type of compensation. Those timelines in those instances, you have the field people who are essentially there to evaluate what is going to be undisputed, right? So what conservatively can I come out and write a sheet for that will not be in dispute and cut a check less deductible? Right. Because the one thing people need in any type of loss scenario, from my experience, the one thing people need is something to do. Right. And if that something to do isn't constructive, it's going to be destructive. And the thing that usually gets destroyed is the trust between the insurance company and the insured.
If there was any to begin with,
well, and it, from my perspective, so I've been in an insurance company, right? And I've seen the right thing done. I've been in insurance company, offices and rooms where I haven't seen the right thing being
Name
done.
names, David. Here we go.
Name names. So I won't name names, but I'll put it this way. If I'm there, and this is something that I just learned about myself over 17 years in the industry, when I'm there and I'm in that room and I see that stuff, that's when I speak up. And that's when I'm saying, wait a minute, the policy reads this way, it says this is the way, I think we should be applying these things, right? In terms of coverage, and always sort of going towards, the policyholder side. So that never really led to great things with me and my managers and other things. But at the end of the day, that's me just staying true to me, right? It's, to me, you can do a lot of things in this world, right? And if you're not going to stay true to who you are as a person, then getting into other things isn't going to bode well for you either, right? So
you got to figure out what compromises you're willing to make or not, right?
Well,
here we are. We've got David Princeton, Advocate Claim Service, right? No S.
Service,
And that's claims advocacy.
It clearly says right there, John.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at it as I was saying it. It's almost one of those things where like, don't say the S, don't say the S. No!
Yeah. That's okay. You'd be surprised how many screenshots I get where people tell me my website's down, and sure enough, there's an S on the end. So,
Well, is that domain available?
I honestly, I don't know. So
it always surprises me, especially large organizations don't buy the subdomains or the common misspellings or whatever. Weren't you telling me, Brian, wasn't that Pepsi? Like Pepsi didn't buy Pepsi.com, and there's a whole ordeal.
Right. Isn't it PepsiCo.com, I think?
Something like that, where they had to basically sue to get it. And
a lot of trademark issues with that when all that stuff was going on. People were, the late adopters,
Well, there's a lot of people that have filed for how they're changing the name of the Redskins.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that have gone and trademarked whatever football name is out there, and hopeful, that they would then pay for the rights to that name.
Have they said yet? Right now, it's just the Washington football team, right?
This year, football team. That's it.
Oh,
really? Wow.
Yeah, or football club or something. Something like very soccer sounding.
Yeah, Washington Football Club. Well, hey, it's a step, right? So, I guess to wrap up that part of it, I've come across public adjuster once. A neighbor of mine's house burnt down or burnt pretty severely, and a public adjuster came and they signed up with him. So I guess from this side of the fence, it's always been, if you do program work in insurance, it's definitely taboo because insurance companies aren't fond of public adjusters, right? Mm-hmm. The public adjuster value proposition is they will get the insured more for their claim, right? It's kind of like you said, they have to have a covered claim and then they'll maximize the claim. Yeah. The negative side of that, or the extreme side of that, is going above and beyond what's covered, right? Or just throwing anything and everything at it. And then the I guess where a lot of homeowners and what I've seen is get kind of hosed is whatever additional they get. Usually that's the commission to the public adjuster, right?
Dude, I got an arm!
Yeah, right, yes!
If you've been watching or listening to the DYOJO podcast for any period of time, you know that we do things a little bit differently here. Our goal is to inform you, to entertain you, and to help you shorten your dang learning curve for professional development. So, in the spirit of doing things a little bit differently, here is a sponsored advertisement done a little bit differently. You need the data. You need the information. We need data.
Please, please.
Right? You need the data from the field, but so many of these systems are cumbersome, right? How do you help the people that you need the information from get it to you quicker? Your pinch point, you as the owner, the estimator, the project manager, production manager, you need the data.
Give me. I need.
Right? We get paid for the data, the documentation that we can present to, the clients and the carriers and the programs. So when we start to think as people in a position of leadership, I talk about this in Be Intentional Estimating, how do we facilitate the processes so that the people that we need the information from can give it to us more consistently, clearly, and effectively.
I need. Give me, please.
One of the things that really excites me about Xcelerate Restoration Software, this is designed by restoration contractors for restoration contractors, and they work diligently on their platform to make it as tech-friendly as possible. If it can't be used by the people in the field, then how is that going to translate into helping you, bill more efficiently, effectively, and get paid quicker?
All right.
We are excited. This collaboration between Xcelerate Restoration Software and the DYOJO podcast. Xcelerate hands down offers the best field service solution in the restoration market. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're giving away a free iPad to prove it. We'll have a prize package together, which will include a copy of my book, a DYOJO podcast t-shirt, the free iPad, which will be co-branded from Xcelerate and the DYOJO podcast. If you go to xlrestorationsoftware.com/landing/iPad-giveaway. We'll have the link in the notes. And you can register there. You can also sign up to request a free demo. But get this by restoration contractors for restoration contractors to help you shorten that time between work completed and work paid for by presenting you with a tool that is easy for your techs to use so you get the information that you need.
Give me. I need.
Check it out. We'll have the links in the show notes, and look forward to seeing you all live October 5th when we announce the winner of the Xcelerate Restoration Software iPad free giveaway.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of experience with public adjusters in that sense?
Most of my
professionally, right?
So professionally as an adjuster, I've dealt with public adjusters. So I used to be involved in claims in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, where they're very much more common. It's actually more common that people will use a public adjuster on your East and West Coast than it is here in the Midwest. So
Okay.
in the Midwest, I would say that it's more of a, call it a pioneer spirit. But what we mainly see in this area, so when I was a commercial claim consultant, you would just see them essentially chasing the hailstorms.
Yeah.
Right. So, hey, do you mind if I climb up on the roof? If I find some dents, maybe you'll get a free roof out of this. Right. So what I've actually laud is that here in Wisconsin, they passed legislation where out-of-state public adjusters now have to be licensed, so it's mandatory. In the state of Wisconsin, it's optional, so you don't have to, but you can. So, and the first time you could sit for the test was July 1st of this year, so I sat for the test July 1st at 8 a.m. With a remote proctor through a web camera, and then answered 35 questions successfully and got my license. So, yeah, it wasn't a hard exam. But I did create a manual because there wasn't one available. So, because I do provide continuing education services, so I made myself my own instruction manual so that I could get through the exam. So, yeah.
Well, this comes up from time to time, and Brian and I have talked about this. Is do you see restoration companies or even people outside of restoration companies crossing that line into, like, our job on the restoration side? I always try to make clients really aware of that. We're advocating on your behalf, but our job to be not committing fraud is to try to determine, how do we put you back to pre-loss conditions, no more and no less, right? What were you before? What does it take? And there's some gray area, like insurance has these weird, like, does the flooring stop at the door at a line of sight or whatnot? And so those are interpretational to some degree, unless it's clearly spelled out in the policy, right? But do you see, is that something that you see where people like restorers or even insureds kind of go over the line in trying to, and basically veer into public adjusting without having the license, and what the consequences of that might be?
I've never seen consequences, right, come from somebody trying to just advocate, but I would kind of put it this way. At least in the great state of Wisconsin, so every state will have a little bit different rules, but at least consistently what I've seen as I've applied for more states across the license, or excuse me, more licenses across the state, is they will actually not allow a public adjuster to be the contractor, to select the contractor, right? It basically, a public adjuster is just there to serve the insured and liaison with the insurance company. So so most states, at least that I've seen, preclude a public adjuster from both being your contractor and your adjuster. The other part of it is some states will actually cap what a public adjuster is allowed to charge for a fee. And so, like in Wisconsin, it's only if there's a governmental order by either the governor or the president of some type of catastrophe event, then they cap fees at 10%. Otherwise, after that, there's no other restriction really on the fee. It's just, it has to be disclosed and it has to be obvious, and you have to have a mathematical example of what it looks like. So that way you have transparency. Yeah. So to me, I mean, a contractor has always, I think, been an advocate in claim situations, because at the end of the day, you have someone who knows something is broken, right? And then they know they have someone they've trusted to fix, like Brian, right? So, and then they have this adjuster that's supposed to somehow figure out the price.
Yeah.
What I always advise people to do is this, and it doesn't matter if you're a homeowner or a business. Pick the contractor you want to actually do the job, get them in touch with the adjuster, and give the adjuster and the contractor this instruction. When you guys reach an agreed price on this and scope of work to put me back in pre-loss condition, I'm then ready to authorize things to happen, right? So, because the authorization can only come from the insured, right? So from the policyholder. The insurance company isn't going to pick your contractor.
No power tools.
Oh, what?
No power tools.
You know what I forgot? I have to brush my teeth.
The insurance company isn't going to pick your contractor. The insurance company isn't going to pick your contractor, right? The insurance company is, well, you can have program work, but they can't pick it. So that's steering, right? And steering's illegal. So that's steering, right? And steering's illegal. And that's why there's 5 minutes of disclosures on every phone call saying you can pick anybody you want to do your work. However, we've contracted with so-and-so, right?
And there's severe consequences if you don't choose this person, right?
Well, there can be.
Like, we're just not going to respond for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, but who does that hurt? Honestly, if you have well, I think in the end it'll end up hurting the insurance company, because if they've tendered proper notice under the claim and they document their losses and their damages, they have a duty to mitigate, right? So you can still mitigate and perform work, but now if you don't feel comfortable that you have a covered cause of loss, which is where a public adjuster could come in and tell you, yeah, this is reasonably covered, right?
Yeah.
You can be green lighting a lot of stuff. What you don't want to do is spoliate evidence, right? So whatever your sources are, so especially if you're on a fire scene that fire scene hasn't been released, you shouldn't be in there, right? So by authorities or insurance companies. But then you also have in water losses, you don't get rid of the source of the leak, right? So you stop it from water coming out, right? But otherwise you leave that thing intact and you wait for the adjuster to either collect the evidence or a plumber, or if it's big enough, they're sending out an engineer to do it, right?
Right.
So there's lots of ways that you can actually use that to your advantage in claim situations.
What's the line where you become a public adjuster from just being a contractor that's trying to advocate for your client?
I would put it this way. I don't think a contractor could ever cross that line because they're not public adjusters, right? It's sort of like me saying I can give legal advice. Well, no, I can't. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not licensed to give legal advice anywhere on the planet, right? So there's things that I don't think you can do. Where you will get yourself in trouble as a contractor is when you present them with the repair contract and the public adjuster contract and try to serve as both, right?
I think
so
because
that would be a no-no.
Right. Because the question, I think where all this came from was it's becoming more of an issue with customers that will, because we're thorough and we do Xactimate, we'll fight with the adjuster on their behalf and we'll get them an approved price. Typically it's the adjuster comes and say at 10, we come in at 30 and then, hey, we settle for 27. And then that customer, probably 1 out of every 5 is like, I'm just going to keep the money. Thanks.
Yep.
So what we've been kicking around the idea is if, similar to like a work authorization letter, if there's some sort of stipulation in our contract that like, hey, if we're going to write an estimate for you and fight for you on your behalf and you come to an agreement with, for an approved estimate based on our Xactimate that we've presented to your adjuster and you don't then use us, that we're then going to charge you, say, a 10%, almost like a commission. But that we proposed that online, and then instantly we were like, well, that's public adjusting.
Yeah,
so that's what we're trying.
So here,
where's that line?
Yeah, so what you just described would be crossing that line.
Okay.
Because you're. Let me ask you this: with your business, do you offer free estimates?
We do.
And so when you offer that free estimate and somebody wants to bicker with you about the price and you come to an agreement, but they still don't sign on the dotted line, did you win the work?
No.
So all that's happening here is the insurance company's agreeing with you on a scope and a price, but at the end of the day, you don't have that work from that client, right?
Right.
But in the different scenario, you've obviously expended a lot of labor in reaching that agreed price under the premise that you're going to get the work. I would say 2 things. One is the risk management mind that I would have, which is have that conversation with your insured or with your water loss victim, right? What are your intentions here?
Yeah.
Right. So I've written a fair scope, a fair sheet, have that transparency conversation, because the other thing that could be happening is well, you might be running the price up to give them the quality of work that you perform. They can find anybody to do a poor job, right? And I forget what you guys said in one of your other podcasts, but you can either be good, fast, or have it done right, but you can only pick 2.
Right. Right.
So, or cheap was the last one, right?
Fast, good, or cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. Fast, good, or cheap. So you gotta pick one, right? So, or pick 2. So when that homeowner's going through that decision, I think you got to pre-qualify up front. Woo!
Yeah, right there, Johnny.
Wow.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up. Don't bully me.
Whiskey sour.
Yeah. So I think you just pre-qualify your homeowner to get an understanding, and then the other thing to look into, which is very common in the restoration world, are assignments of claims, right? So you assign the claim from the homeowner to the contractor right up front, so that way you have a work authorization, and maybe that's the other part of this. Put the cart in front of the horse. Get your work authorization up front, knowing that the insurance company's offered X, you're at Y, and your job is to get it to the point where you'll be able to perform that work for that homeowner. Because then you've already got a signed contract and scope of work. It's just a matter of figuring out the price.
one contractor in New Jersey, I think he said he charges like a $2,500 flat fee.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my question, was like, have you ever had an issue executed? And he goes, for the most part, and that's what Brian and I were talking about. Obviously, you want to do better screening, right? Which is exactly what you're talking about, David, is try to get a better sense of like, is this customer serious?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where contractors are feeling slighted is the insurance company comes out and writes a way low sheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Brian, you were telling me about one, like a manufactured home, they're at like $3,000, and like even do the job at cost is going to be over 12, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a low sheet. It almost de-incentivizes the contractor to help a client just say, well, get it. I mean, I guess the other thing would be get an estimate from your adjuster and then we'll talk, but is it the commission that causes an issue? If you charge a flat rate, obviously.
Well, here, let me propose what we've kind of kicked around. That way you can kind of answer, David. So it's, you sign, whether it's a work authorization or some sort of preliminary upfront contract
or something.
Yeah, where we're going to negotiate on your behalf. We're going to build you an estimate and get it all approved.
I should.
Oh, did that scare you? What is this? Oh, what was that? Oh, it's just a book here. What was that? What was that? Just this little book here. The book is so big it makes my hands look small, but Be Intentional Estimating by John Isaacson, the Intentional Restorer. And the reason it hit so hard is because it's all about developing the right mindset and habits for yourself and your team to succeed with estimating property insurance claims. What?
I read about it in a book.
What was that? Mindset and habits for yourself and your team to succeed with estimating property insurance claims. Sounds good, right? I gotta tell you, personal story, a lot of fun, but my sister bought the book, and my nieces, who are both under 6, they sent some really cute pictures of themselves holding the book, and when they flipped it over on the back and saw my ugly mug, they're like, "What? Uncle John wrote a book?" And one of them said, "Well, maybe I should write a book. I'm going to start tomorrow."
There's no crying in baseball! No crying!
And I was thinking, like, man, there's no other compliment than anyone can give or review that will top that. Because if you can do something, if I can write a book, trust me, you could write a book. And if you have something else that you're working on or wanting to accomplish, the cool thing about following through on something, and that's really getting your college degree or writing a book, those kinds of things, it's really about the perseverance to see it across the finish line, right? Starting a business, all of those things. A podcast, it's endurance, right? Can you get it across the finish line, do what you set out to do, work through the obstacles? So if something, remember that it made me think, what you're doing isn't just for you. It may inspire people in ways that you hadn't even thought of or encourage them. Hopefully that's what the DYOJO podcast does. Hopefully that's what the stinking book does.
Say, we didn't do this last time. None of us are qualified legal experts. We're just discussing this.
You need to have a little disclaimer go across the bottom there.
Nobody can take this as the Bible or whatever else. This is just a discussion between 3 friends talking about hypotheticals, right?
Correct.
So hypothetically, I reserve the right to say ignorant, stupid things.
Yep.
And be completely flawed, but seem to come across with the confidence of knowing, right? Yep. And deliver stupidity in a convincing way. So I reserve that right. And forever may I be impugned and have it not held against me.
And all hate mail can be sent to David at advocateclaimservices.com.
Yes, yeah.
.org.
.org, yeah.
Okay, sorry, bro.
Here.
Okay, so what we were proposing was some sort of upfront contract that if we go through the hassle of negotiating,
also design build, right?
And say we come to an agreement and we because the perfect example was we spent 3 weeks. This is really what teed it off about a month and a half ago. We spent about 3 weeks negotiating for this homeowner under the understanding we were their contractor. We were going to do the work. The contractor then finally gives us approval, and we're like, okay, homeowner, hey, we got your approval. We're ready to go. And they're like, well, thanks for all your efforts, but we're just going to keep the money and I'm going to do it myself. So my thinking was, because of my real estate background before, if we had some sort of agreement that if that is the case and we negotiate on your behalf and say like that estimate, for example, was $18,000, we get 10% of that $18,000 for our efforts of negotiating with you, with your adjuster. If you choose to work with us and go through with our estimate, there's no fee. Almost. So that was kind of the idea, but based on all of that, it sounds like that kind of teeters on that public adjusting. We just want people to be serious with us. If you're going to waste our time, we don't want to waste our time.
Yeah, but then you're kind of incentivizing them to be a little dishonest with you because they just have to conceal a motive, and there's still an out on the other end of that. I think you have a couple things. I would challenge you to get a better understanding of what it is you're being paid for, right? Because if you're being paid for your advocacy to drive a price, and you're doing it on behalf of a policyholder to their insurance company
on a commission
to reach a settlement on a commission basis, like I just pulled up the Washington State public adjusting laws, or like statutes, and yeah, you're pretty much hitting that sweet spot.
Okay.
Now, does it change any if you're charging a flat fee for, if you call it an estimating fee or a contracting fee or whatever. I mean, it's the same. I would have estimators working for me that wanted to do kitchen designs. And, I remember having an argument. A guy said he took a kitchen from $15K to $90K and he was super excited. Beautiful plan. He had been there like 6 times. And I was like, dude, you're not a friggin' kitchen designer. Like, if you're going to design this kitchen, let's get a contract that we're designing this kitchen. So in that sense, I guess it still goes back to better screening ultimately is the answer, right? That's the cleanest understanding. But I guess that was in the hypothetical realm. Is there a way to pitch that is above board, or more above board, I suppose, than it sounds like the commission and using the terminology negotiating obviously is not the way to go. And I wish I remember exactly what the quote was from the guy from New Jersey, but his was a flat fee. He says he does it up front, almost like a.
Did that guy from New Jersey then apply that to, like, did he waive the fee if he did the work?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he said it's pretty rare that, he has to act upon it, but it's just kind of, they use it basically as that gauge to try to gauge someone's seriousness,
and he would charge that up front? Or would he charge that?
I think it was in his contract. Like, it sounds like there's a good amount of contractors that are having customers sign contracts up front, and in their contracts are, some provision for, hey, which I know Ed Cross, the restoration lawyer, talks about. In order for a contract to be executable, there has to be a price. So that can be difficult if you haven't negotiated it yet. But.
And is it enforceable?
Right.
So you guys are in the great state of Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So public adjuster means an adjuster employed by and representing solely the financial interests of the insured named in the policy. So that's your definition of a public adjuster.
Well, what if I'm trying to get the prices high for our company? Not.
Well,
I'm a businessman.
Yeah, so let me go back to.
I'm a businessman, big businessman. I'm a businessman, but businessman. I do business, man. Talking business, man. How you like my tie?
I do business thing.
Yeah.
So let's go back to something that you guys have said on not only this show, but I think on others, right? If you write your sheet right, there's really nothing to argue about.
Right.
So I don't know that it's necessarily trying to drive a price up, because at the end of the day, you might have some wiggle room here or there, but if you're not writing a good scope and a good sheet, that's why it comes off as cheap by the insurance company and overpriced by the contractor.
Yeah.
And that's why adjusters have the title they do. They adjust claims. They review for discrepancies. They request the evidence, and they check boxes, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that you have a loss. So I don't know that as good as somebody can feel at the end of a negotiation, at the end of the day, as long as that homeowner's getting what they need so that they're living their life again, and your business is making money and the insurance company is surely making money, right?
Yeah.
So all of those things are happening all around that loss. And that's the whole principle of indemnity, right? It's to pay what you owe to put somebody back because you sold a promise. You sold words on paper.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I had a good buddy of mine. He was on episode 12 he was Les Schwab. Les Schwab's thing was, they don't have Les Schwab in the Midwest, right?
I'm not even familiar with it.
So it's I always forget that. So it's a tire service center, and forever, fairly local. They don't franchise; they're wholly owned, and so they multi-spots up and down the West Coast.
Free beef.
But yeah, and their thing for forever was they run out to you as your car pulls in, free tire checks. There's quite a few free services that they offer. And, he was always frustrated because customers would come into Les Schwab to get the free estimates, the free checks, and then go price shop, right? So obviously it used to be you valued what Les Schwab did, so you stayed with them. They may be higher here, but they provide more value here, and And so the conversation there was, so we have this old model that appealed to a generation of consumers, and now it's almost become a detriment to our profitability, and it's no longer attracting clients other than the price shoppers, right? Because they were higher. And so I think it speaks to all companies, right? You have to figure out ways. The paradigm has changed. The environment has changed. I always go back to Jeff Bezos says, I read an article where he said, a lot of companies want to talk about what's going to change, and we always try to think about what's not going to change at Amazon. They're always going to want more selection. They're going to want it delivered faster. They're going to want it cheaper. And if you know those things are true, then you have to structure yourself to think differently. So it's something Ryan and I always talk about, like, well, what about this or that? Dog's probably saving us from a rabbit or something. But I think it just speaks to, the client has changed, and maybe it's tough because probably the era of free estimates has run its course. But, if you're the first contractor that's going to fall on that sword, you're probably going to be, hey, settle down. You're probably going to be, in a world of hurt, even though it's the right maybe way to go.
I think what's funny is if you think about it from Les Schwab's standpoint, John, like that model worked until the internet. How easy is it now? Like if you're buying tires to just get the price sheet for free and then just pull your phone out. And I mean, you can find that set of tires at 15 different locations and just go with the cheapest one. Same with the homeowner. I mean, how easy is it for you to go to Floor Decor and More or wherever and just, okay, well, this contractor got me $25,000 for my restoration. Well, I can shop and find all this stuff myself and use all it's so easy now for a homeowner to be the general contractor.
Well, and in 2008, when the Great Recession hit, too, I mean, you had so many people and talented people out of work. And so people legitimately had, well, I have a brother that's a phenomenal carpenter.
There's always going to be someone that can do it for cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I guess we didn't really. Thanks, David. You're a lot of help. Okay.
Basically, what you're saying, David, is if you get that initial feeling up front that this homeowner's out to, you just don't got a good vibe from them, then it's probably something you should just walk away from.
Yeah, every aspect of sales is pre-qualify your buyer, right?
Right. You
got to know what you're spending your time on in order to get that ROI in the end, right? And I would say this, a lot of times you just got to trust your gut. If you feel like this is going to be a difficult situation, got to figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
and
you've already identified, without naming names, one carrier that's terrible to work with, and so the other side is if you know the clients pick the policy based on the lowest price, you know they're probably already not the best client, right? Because there's going to be policy issues and client alignment issues, you know. So
well, so let me maybe try to demystify the insurance price piece of this, right? So couple things. One, not all promises are created equal, right? So the insurance policy you buy from one company for X dollars and you buy a different one for the same amount from a different insurance company, there can be a lot of commonalities, but there can also be some really drastic differences, right? Yeah. And much like that Schwab dealership that's trying to attract customers in, it's never about the item they lead with, right? I want to sell you tires because I'm going to sell you the brakes when I take it off and inspect them and find a problem, right? Or I'm going to find that your tail light's out and sell you a light bulb. Everything about sales has always been the add-ons. What can I add on to this experience, right? You know, so I think the difference is in the contracting world, while you do have those upsell opportunities, from what you're describing to me is you're describing situations where people are essentially taking advantage of the fact that you get a free car wash every time you get your oil changed, right? Like they're coming by because of these ancillary things you do, i.e. I argue with the adjuster to get a higher price and then you fire me off the project, right?
Right.
You know, so I think you got to do a couple things. If it was me, I would say get a signed work authorization, leaving open the price and limit their out of pocket to whatever their deductible is, right? Say like, I will perform, like I've written my scope of estimate, here it is, sign my contract, and what like the most you will pay if your insurance company pays this job is the deductible.
Do you recommend getting that work auth signed before you write your estimate or when you are on site doing your initial job walk?
Honestly, if it's me, I don't know why I'm doing a job walk if I don't necessarily know that I'm getting the work, right? Okay. Like, I think you got to, you know, explain to them and get that value buy-in early. If walking the job site helps lend to credibility, but I'm not necessarily starting to scope, right? I don't think I would go into a scope mode, especially if you hear the line of my insurance agent told me to get 3 estimates.
Yeah.
Right. And so what could be happening there is they may not actually have a claim reported yet.
Yeah. Right.
The agent got a call and they're trying to pre-qualify their own loss experience in their own agency of what's going on there. Right. So you want to try to be, as the contractor, I think at least, in a position where you know you're working with somebody who's hiring you. And I would get that work authorization up front. Like it's, especially in a mitigation situation, if it's a live scenario you're walking into of sewer backup, water, you know, that type of stuff. I think if I'm that contractor and I'm walking into that, you're usually responding before a claim number is even assigned, right? So, and if you're doing that, you know you're getting some type of authorization, you know you're getting some type of assignment, and because you're expending resources, and you're also pre-qualifying if that person can pay you should they not have the right coverage.
Yeah.
Right? So, because those conversations of, you know, hey, I'm going to be doing this phase, it's $2,500. Do I have your okay?
Yeah.
You know, yes, you have my authorization, $2,500. Okay. Hey, that 2,500, we're at 18 right now. I'm thinking we're going to be going to another 5. Have you heard from your adjuster yet? You know, what's that claim number look like? Have they communicated anything about coverage? Right? Would you mind if I made a phone call? You know, because if you get too far out over their ability to pay, especially now in a COVID situation, right, where, you know, people's work and other things are potentially in turmoil, you know, you got to always sort of pre-qualify and hedge. Right?
I think everyone is aware that California is kind of its own entity when it comes to losses and contracts and all those kinds of special things. We reached out to Ed Cross to ask him a little bit about what's going on in California with the wildfires.
Hi, I'm Ed Cross, the restoration lawyer.
Hey, Ed. I'm John Isaacson, the intentional restorer. Can you tell us about what's going on in California?
It's September the 11th, 2020, and once again, we're in a state of disaster. Thousands of homes and businesses have been incinerated. in a fire season that's as devastating as it is historic. 30 enormous blazes are burning across California right now. 20,000 people have had to evacuate. My heart goes out to everyone who's suffered in these unthinkable losses.
Yeah, there's a lot of fires going up here in Oregon and Washington as well. 2020, right?
As if 2020 hasn't already been bad enough with the pandemic.
You and I know property restoration contractors are going to be on the front lines of helping people put their homes and businesses back together. Are there special considerations that need to be taken into account in California, as there always are?
But there are a number of special rules that apply when a contractor is working in California during a state of emergency.
Yeah, but California always has weird rules. Like, is there consequences?
And every time something like this happens, a bunch of contractors get themselves in trouble.
All right, Ed, I saw your video, Free Forms for California 2020 Wildfire Restoration. Can you condense that information for us? What do contractors, especially in California, need to know?
I know you're scrambling to get jobs set up, and I'd like to help, so I want to quickly alert you to 2 common pitfalls and send you some free material to help. First, no one in the state of California can present, solicit, negotiate, or execute a contract for residential work unless that person is either the actual holder of a contractor's license or has a home improvement salesperson's license and is employed by a licensed contractor.
Okay, so they got all these additional things, hoops you got to jump through, but it's a state of disaster. They're not enforcing that, right? Like, how can they actually catch up to, supposed bad actors or people that are negligent?
Now, when disasters occur, the state of California sets up sting operations with actors who call restoration companies asking for estimates. They set up hidden cameras in the house and they record the conversations, and law enforcement waits nearby. If the company representative starts talking about the price of the work or solicits or negotiates a contract, but is not a licensed contractor or a registered HIS on the license, law enforcement swoops in, and in many cases, the company representative walks off in handcuffs. It's a serious violation.
All right, I've watched your Ed Cross Free Forms for California 2020 Wildfire Restoration free resources video. I know you have to, in California, give the right of rescission. It's 3 documents. How can a contractor ensure they followed the process and make sure they're not missing something?
In some, it's a bundle of 3 pages that get provided to the customer, and that's in addition to your California home improvement contract. One way you can tell if your cancellation package is incomplete is to count the pages. If you don't have 3 pages dedicated to the right to cancel, it's incomplete.
Most contractors, especially the large loss ones, this is what they're geared for, to go into an area where there's a lot of damage and help a lot of people and try to do the things right. So I know it says Free Forms for California 2020 Wildfire Restoration, your video on YouTube and on your website, therestorationlawyer.com. What are some of the things that you're helping contractors with?
The notice has to be taken verbatim directly from the California Civil Code. Don't summarize it. You'll be subject to disciplinary actions if you don't provide the notice word for word. I'll save you the trouble and just give it to you for free.
Well, Ed, thank you for taking the time to discuss this with us. Again, encourage people to go look up Edward Cross, the Restoration Lawyer, therestorationlawyer.com. Free Forms for California 2020 Wildfire Restoration is the video on YouTube, where Ed goes into much more detail, which is obviously specifically applicable to California wildfires, but maybe great information for anyone responding to wildfires and storms elsewhere as well. You brought up, when you said that, David, that whatever your lure is also going to be your downfall, right? So if you're setting up the expectation, we're going to get you the best price, insurance is lowballing, you are almost setting up the client to think price first, right? Because now they're thinking, well, these guys are getting me more than the insurance company, but then I can get more by hiring somebody to do it less. So it's almost, I didn't even think about that till now. What I've taught, and it's been our downfall for a long period of time, restoration contractors will tell people, we will handle everything.
The only thing you'll have to pay is your deductible, and those kinds of things. And it already sets up, you need that client to be involved in the claim because there may be a delay by the adjuster. And if you've told the customer they don't have to do anything from the start, then you're hosed because they're not going to help you make those phone calls. They're not going to follow up with emails. They're not going to help you get paid when the insurance is dragging it out. So, that I think when you said that, that's another thing is if the value proposition, say like for All American is saying, hey, we're going to help get the right price, but price is the lure, then you're going to lose that fish, which is what happened in that claim on price, rather than saying, hey, you want us because we're going to do the best job, provide the best value. And they're scared to not hire you because, there's plenty of contractors that'll not provide the value we're providing. So it might be interesting, Brian, on that side too, is just go back to, it's like unintentionally setting up the price.
Can I give you an example, John, just real quick?
Please
take price off the table.
Yeah.
Just take price off the table altogether, because the price at the end of the day is between you and the insurance company and not necessarily between you and the insured, right? Yeah. It's not necessarily the homeowner. That's where I think you just, to me, the scope of work, I think, could be sufficiently limited, and check with your attorneys, right? You don't want to be breaking laws unknowingly, because ignorance of the law is no excuse for the law, right?
Right.
But I would look into just ultimately setting whatever the deductible is, and you don't have to put dollars on it. It's just whatever the deductible is the most that they will incur when they hire you, and that you take it from that point forward and restore their home, right? Or their office or their business, or insert, whatever you're working on. So because then at that point, the price is between you and the adjuster. You've got your assignment of claim, right? And I've never run into a situation where a claim was not assignable, right? So a policy is not assignable, but claims are assignable every day of the week. So it's just, so for example, in Wisconsin, public adjusters cannot have any claims assigned to them, right? So I'm not allowed to have an assignment of claim and take quote unquote price off the table because of how I'm licensed. But the other thing, just to reiterate, because I don't necessarily want my phone blowing up for the wrong reasons, right? So I'm looking for claims that are doubted, disputed, right? Reservation of rights, denial letters. I am honestly not your Xactimate guy. I know how to audit an estimate. You put me in front of the computer screen and I can't necessarily perform the task, right? Yeah. So I'm not a damages guy. I'm a policy guy. So I help get coverage for claims. I also help present losses. So I know how to take your estimate and work with you on that estimate so that we end up with a very well-positioned claim based on the terms and conditions of the policy. Right.
I believe strongly there will always be a need for us to have a well-articulated innovation policy with emphasis on human resource development. Thank you.
I think, John, one thing too, as a contractor, the reason we do talk about price is because most homeowners, if they're going to say they're going to redo their yard, they're going to call 3 people and they're going to go with the lowest bid. And the problem is with us is we always try to be as as detailed as possible on our Xactimate estimates. So we're going to be higher than their adjuster. So we try to broach the subject as your adjuster is going to try to go as low as possible. We're going to try to start as high as possible. So, because then we're going to meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so can I give you a different way to do that, Brian?
Sure.
Don't put it on the column on the right? So when you're looking at that page and the prices are all lined up over here, you're talking about the wrong side of the column.
Okay.
You should be talking about the scope of work, and not the price for that scope, right? And say, look, you might be looking at the price side, but where we need to focus is the scope side, because at the end of the day, so and John, you would know more about this than me, but if we're all using Xactimate, the prices are baked in. There's not much manipulation that happens with that, right? So it's
why we
not
use Xactimate.
Exactly. Standardization, methodization, analytics, all that stuff that goes into building it. But here's the thing. How can you have 2 people using the same tool that has the same prices, but they come out different? It's the scope. It's not the price.
Because your adjuster's going to try to get the scope as low as possible.
Well, and can I also say this, Brian? Yeah. I don't think they're trying to get the scope low as possible. It's ignorance.
Okay.
It's ignorance. I honestly, I'll put it to you this way, Brian. When you've had disputes with adjusters about the scope, right, or ultimately the price,
yeah,
is there common ground that's ultimately found? Do you give some and take some, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it really always just about the price? Does the line item not change? Like, does the actual scope?
You're 100% correct. It is the scope that changes, and that's a really good way of phrasing it and selling it from that perspective: the left side versus the right.
Yeah, because think of it this way too. I always like to look at the rhetoric people use to describe something, right? So when you are feeding into insurance companies are always going to pay the lowest ultimate price, right?
Right.
But we just had a conversation and agreed that, well, if we modify the scope, the price will come out the same, right?
Yep.
So it's more about, I think, putting yourself in a position to educate that adjuster, because every adjuster's manager is busy. Every adjuster, is coming out to try to do a good job.
Yeah.
Even the worst adjuster I've ever dealt with is still thinking they're trying to do a good job, right? If they were just in it to screw people, I don't know that that's going to be enough to get somebody out of bed.
There's at least 10% of people in every industry, and contractors included, right?
Yeah,
Public adjusters, claims advocates, right?
Yeah.
That are just, turds, right?
I don't think they're trying to necessarily screw people, though, but I do think that is not the adjuster's job to get truly the price as low as possible, because they are representing the insurance company and their I don't know.
Well, but
shareholders, stockholders.
Yeah, like they care more about the insurance than the insured.
Well,
for the most point,
probably,
that's their priority.
They don't care about the insurance; they care about keeping their job, right?
But their job is to make sure that they have the insurance companies back first, and the second is the homeowner.
And you see,
so I would disagree with that.
Well, Brian
I would disagree with that.
Brian had an adjuster that told him outright. He goes, "I agree with what you're saying, but this is what I'm allowed to
and that is the one
authorize and how, right?" And so, the one thing that would help all of these people across the board, contractors, public adjusters, independent, captive, is a phenomenal book by John Isaacson, The Intentional Restorer.
Right?
The Intentional Estimating, available now on Kindle and Paperbook. For the low
Audible
price.
yet, not Audible though, not on Audible.
Yeah. I gotta record. Everybody wants to hear more of my voice, right? So. Oh man. So I thought I was going to release this whole thing as one conversation. Apparently the program I use, it was just like, this is too much. So, so we're going to stop the conversation here. That's a good breaking point. And we'll get into more of the conversation with David Princeton next time as we continue. To be continued. This is a commercial break. All of the bigs. This was planned, guys and gals. This is like, we do a commercial break. It's a cliffhanger. You're like, oh, where's all the rest of the information? When are you guys going to talk about the COVID stuff and business owners finally winning? So that'll be next episode. Oh man, but all in all, this conversation with David there at the beginning part talks about the difference between a public adjuster and a claims advocate, which is interesting. The same license, but public adjuster looks for a covered loss and then helps a client work through that process with their carrier to get what they should be getting for their claim. And then the claims advocate looks for or works with people where there's doubtful and disputed. So we mentioned a particular client that had a claim denied, and Brian referred them to David at Claim Advocate Service and working through that process. So helping people understand invaluable information there. Share that with clients.
if you don't know why the adjuster or the carrier is asking that question, then, don't answer it off the cuff. A great response is, well, why are you asking that question? And so, the pessimist might see that as, leading the witness as such. So when people are honest about, conditions in their home and then get denied, then that's where people like David potentially could come in and help. And so I think it's a great resource for insurance clients and contractors to be able to refer people when, it's gone beyond your point of expertise to be able to help them. So tips for home and business owners to not get taken advantage of by carriers. So in the second part of our conversation, which we will release at another date, we start to break down some of the recent claims specific to COVID for businesses that have been getting denied or pushed off to the side, and finally there's some action there that gives some hope maybe to some business owners. So if you are a reader with Restoration and Remediation magazine, you'll know the Intentional Restorer. I have a monthly column, but recently I released one called Skilled at Trades, Struggling with Business. Tell me if you haven't heard this story. John Doe has been working hard for the man for the past 10 plus years, and he realizes that he's making a lot of money for someone else, but it sure isn't him. Sound familiar to some of you entrepreneurs out there? But, think back to, or maybe you're still in that spot where you're good at your trade. You're a skilled tradesman, but you don't, understand fully the business side or how to be profitable and those kinds of things. So their article kind of breaks down that process and does talk about principles from my book. Oh, what's that? You said, oh, a book? Yeah, there's a book that I wrote. I'm looking for a copy right now. Oh, here we go. I got a whole box of them. Oops, that's upside down. Be Intentional Estimating by John Isaacson, The Intentional Restorer. Developing the right mindset and habits for yourself and your team to succeed with estimating property insurance claims. I would like to say, most business owners, managers, general managers, project managers, estimators, we're judged pretty heavily on our profitability, right? That's how we stay in business. And so breaking down what it looks like to start that from the estimating process. A good estimate sets your production team up for success, so that they can make your client happy, so that you have the information to present to the insurance companies, so that you can get paid, on time for the work that you completed. Estimating is a key aspect of that. And also for new contractors, we've been working with some new contractors. Xactimate can be a very good tool to help you standardize your estimating process. And what does that do? Well, if you standardize it, you're not just shooting from the hip. You have a plan. There's like a components list that can give you your materials and your labor goals. And so you have some kind of target against. And then as you go through the process, there's many people much smarter than me that can help you customize the price list and those kinds of things, and use it in a much more advanced way. But this is more talking about those foundational principles that'll lead you into success with estimating, whether that's for a small business, a contractor just getting started out. Again, that person that's good at the trade, but maybe needs some help in the business area. And so estimating is key. Like in construction, a bad estimate sets everybody off on a bad trajectory, whereas a good estimate gives you a much better chance at a more consistent and profitable outcome. So, end of plug. Upcoming episodes, we've got Stephen Harrington, just a real unique person, and how one of the most intriguing things is how his employer has allowed him to be 100% himself, pursue avenues that are mutually beneficial, and trust him and empower him with that process, and how it's benefited the company, benefited Stephen's, professional development, and then how he's rolled that out to help others on his team. And pretty wild what happens when there's communication, there's clarity, and consistency and trust, right? Which is part of what we talked about
last episode with Kelsey and Megan from Step Up to Success about building that culture, being consistent. They talk a lot about having the conversation, when there's things that aren't quite hitting right, rather than steer away from the conversation, expect it to fix itself, having the conversation and then having the follow through, which is tough. It's not easy. So talking to Steven coming up, that's a real fun conversation. And then Edon from 911 Restoration, his book, we kind of break down his book. I've got my notes there, Get Out of the Truck, and that's another one for entrepreneurs. But also what's really interesting about his story is not only that he started the business, but how kind of rapidly they were able to scale it. So fun conversations. Hope you stick around. Again, the DYOJO podcast, we are infotainment. We're here to inform you and entertain you. We're trying to do things a little bit differently, or maybe a lot differently. And then we want to help you shorten your dang learning curve for professional development. So spread the word. You got us on YouTube if you want to watch, our handsome faces, or if you just love the sound of my voice, it's an Audible only. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Google Podcasts. It's out there. It's available. You got it. Thank you for listening. Please take a peek. Big shout out to Xcelerate Restoration Software for partnering with us and, by restoration contractors for restoration contractors, software to help you simplify your process. So you can get the data from your technicians in the field, translate that into information you can present to the insurance company and clients, and get paid, much quicker. So ease of use is the goal, the key, so that the people in the field can use it and get it to you so that you can use it and get paid. And also Ed Cross for all of his work, helping contractors stay out of trouble. It's amazing, we take so much pride in the work we do, and yet sometimes we take shortcuts in the contracts and the authorizations and those kinds of things. And good grief, the level of detail that you need, especially working in California. So please check out that his video, check out his resources, therestorationlawyer.com. And again, thank you to David Princeton. If you're a restoration contractor and you've got a client that is just getting kind of on the carousel, that's a great resource to help them, maybe get some hope and some relief, by someone who can really dig into their policy and help them, communicate that to the insurance company. So thank you for listening. Thank you for those of you that bought the book. If you find some value, please leave a rating on Amazon, a review on Amazon. That really helps spread the word. So thank you. We'll see you next time.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.